Please welcome to the stage, Brad Lawrence!
It is the 80s, it is the 8th grade, it is lunchtime, and I am in the cafeteria at the nerd table, which is where I belong. But I think when I tell people I was a nerdy kid, I think what they picture in their head is a sort of adorably precocious child with vintage glasses who's just trying to help his single dad find love. Or they picture like like the band of scrappy outsiders, you know, like from a Stephen King novel or like from Stranger Things, you know? And like neither of these things were the case for me. I was not adorable. I was a fat kid with Coke bottle glasses, acne braces, and a mullet, which I did not realize was optional. And as far as the band of scrappy misfits, like I didn't have, there wasn't like a band of friends around me because that's not being a nerd, that's having a happy childhood. What I learned about being a nerd when I was a kid was that when you were a nerd, you were on your own. You might go to school with other kids who were early adopters of They Might Be Giants fandom, but when Bobby Devaney, the kid who had the mustache in the 6th grade, came looking for someone to pound down the hallway, they would disappear. Because there was no throwing your lot in with the others to overcome something. Throwing your lot in just sort of made you a bigger target or next in line. So there was no backup. You were on your own. Now, there was a place we would all gather on occasion. It was not a place of solace or refuge. It was more or less a place where the competing currents of jocks and popular kids and bullies had sort of forced us to coalesce, like that big island of plastic trash in the middle of the ocean. We were like that, but with cartoon character T-shirts and husky jeans. And that was the nerd table in the cafeteria, and that's where I am with the other nerds, and we are talking 85% chance we're talking about Robotech. And suddenly, a note lands on the table in front of me. And it is a standard issue middle school note, folded over 6 or 8 times, college rule paper ripped out of a spiral binder. And I look to see where this comes from, and I see Amanda Stump walking away from me. And I look back at the note, and all of the other nerd kids are looking at the note, waiting for me to open it up and see what it says, and I do, and I read it, and it says, "I like you. Do you like me?" Check yes or no, with corresponding boxes. And I look back at Amanda, and she is now on the far side of the cafeteria, standing with her friends, and they are looking at me and giggling and whispering to themselves. And Amanda is beautiful. She is this lithesome blonde, clear complexioned, creamy skinned, green-eyed, otherworldly creature who seems to have descended from a higher plane down to this earthly one for the sole purpose of torturing and humiliating me. Because we all know this note is bullshit. I know it. All the other nerds know it. We are nerds. We live on pop culture. We have seen all of the after-school specials. We have seen all the special episodes of Facts of Life. We know how this goes, right? We know what this is. And so now one of the other nerds looks at me, immediately registering the conundrum, and he says, this is Rob, he says, "What are you going to do?" And I understand what he's asking me, because this is not like the end of something. When you're a bullied kid, you can sense when like something big is coming, and I know this one's gonna last days. And when you are the subject of this kind of thing, you have 2 options, basically. You can kind of play along, so when the other humiliating shoe finally drops, and they're all pointing and laughing at you, you can laugh too, as if you were in on the joke the whole time, which no one believes. And that one just always struck me as a pathetic route to take, because basically it's like, what could be more sad than playing a fat, pimply Renfield to a bunch of, beautiful, popular Draculas? But the other option isn't great either, because the other option is you can stand your ground and say, no, this is a trick, and I know it's a trick, and I'm not going to fall for it. At which point they'll say, how dare you question the sincerity of my feelings for you? Why would you assume that I'm lying to you? Which leaves you with the job of making a case for why you are too repellent and undesirable for them to like you. And that seems like a Pyrrhic victory at best. But now, as Rob says this to me, a sudden third way sort of hits me like a bolt out of the blue. And I look at Rob and I say, I am going to do nothing. And I'm waiting for Rob to look at me like, that plan's so crazy it might just work. And instead he just stares at me in incomprehension, because apparently I need to explain nothing. And so I do. And my plan is basically this. Wherever this goes from here, whatever Amanda's plan is, I am going to not respond. I am not going to play along. I am not going to protest. I am not going to be mean to her. I am not going to say anything rude. I am going to stand there when she brings me notes, or when she says anything to me, I'm just going to stand there and let her get it all out, and I'm going to give no response, no reaction whatsoever, say nothing, stand there and wait until it's over, and then I will politely and silently walk away. My hope being that after she spent enough time throwing this situation at a sort of fat, pimply Easter Island head who gives her nothing in return, that she will simply give up on this after a couple of days and she'll go away. All right? It is a brilliant plan that does not work at all. Because over the next couple of days, Amanda just keeps it up. She just keeps coming with more notes and coming up to me during after classes and saying, you haven't responded to any of my notes, and I really like you, and my friends all want to know if you like me too. And she keeps doing this, and days are going by, and she keeps doing it, and I'm like, why isn't this working? Because every time she comes up, I do the same thing: stand there, stare at her, wait. When she's done, walk away. No effect whatsoever. She's still just having at it. And then one day, I realize that after she does this, she immediately goes over to her friends, and they whisper and laugh and giggle and point at me. And that's when I realize, oh, I'm not the target audience. My response is not what Amanda wants. It's her friend's response. That's what she's looking for. And that's what she's getting. And so over the next few days, she starts actually ramping things up. And pretty soon she's actually sending her friends over to give me notes and messages from her, because what good is fun if you can't share with people you care about? And at some point, she actually sends this kid over who I'm pretty sure was her actual boyfriend, this kid named Heath, who was a kind of skater jock hybrid, and therefore as terrifying as he was paradoxical. But he comes over, and Heath was a blunt instrument. Heath would have gladly beat the crap out of me for no reason whatsoever, but this psychological warfare thing that Amanda was pulling off, he did not know what to do with that, and she had given him lines, and so he walks over, and he's just not into it, and he gives me the most lackluster shove I have ever received from a bully, and he goes, hey man, you better leave my girlfriend alone, fat ass. Like that, and I do the same thing. I just stand there and stare at him and do nothing, and then one of Heath's friends comes running up and tells him there's an actual fight happening in the cafeteria, and Heath's eyes light up for the first time during the entire exchange, and he goes racing to the carnage. And as he goes, I can see Amanda standing in a distance, and she looks put out that he has delivered such a lackluster performance, but then she turns to her friends and whispers and giggles, and they laugh, and they're back on track. But as I'm watching them whisper and giggle and laugh and get back on track, what I'm wondering is, does Amanda have any idea, does she realize at all that with all this was going on during Heath's lackluster performance and my standing there stoically the entire time, I am terrified? Because any interaction I have with a boy my age at this point often ends with a swing at my face. I get in so many fights these days, and I hate every single one of them. And this has been going on for so long, since the second grade when I first started to put on the weight, and I didn't know how to handle the teasing, and it all sort of like went in this spiral that I have not been able to pull out of ever since, and it's been 6 years of near total isolation. I leave school, and I see no one. I go home, I spend all of my time alone reading comic books or drawing, and then I go down to the woods that run through the subdivisions and try desperately to avoid the other kids because I am terrified of them. And at this point, though, I have begun to hit puberty, and with puberty, a sort of new dawning self-awareness has arrived, and with that self-awareness, there is now this feeling that accompanies the isolation and loneliness that is actual physical pain. It is like there's a void, a hole has opened up in my center and is trying to drag the rest of me into it. And there have been times of late when I'll be down by the old playground where none of the other kids go anymore, down in the woods, and I will find myself kneeling on the grass, doubled over in actual, literal, physical agony. And I cannot get up and I cannot move. But because of that self-awareness, there's now also a part of me that is detached and standing back and is fascinated that an emotion can cause this much actual pain. And it's around this time that I begin to have a certain fantasy. And the fantasy is this. I find Amanda's address in the phone book. Ask your parents what a phone book was. And I look it up, and it's easy to figure out like which house is her parents' house. And I have this fantasy that I will go over to her house and I will knock on the door and that she will come outside. And that maybe here, away from all of the other kids and away from her friends, I can make her see me as a person who is in pain. And it is wintertime when this is happening, and we don't get a lot of snow in Missouri, but the sky turns this kind of hard slate gray, and it gets very low, and the grass turns brown, and it gets hard and cold, and that is always the backdrop for these fantasies, that hard slate Missouri sky hanging over us as we stand there in the front yard. And this fantasy, it ends in different ways as I think about it. You know, sometimes she just sort of like nods and goes, okay, and lets me go and like doesn't talk to me again for like the rest of the year or the rest of my life. Sometimes she decides that I'm actually cool and we become secret friends. And sometimes, because I am a 13-year-old boy and I am going through puberty and everything that Amanda is dangling in front of me is something I want more than anything, but it seems so far away from me right now. And so sometimes those fantasies end with her kissing me, a thing that is embarrassing to say even 30 years later. But I never do it. I never act on this fantasy. What I do instead is something really weird. Okay, I go back into school one day, and I'm heading to shop class, which I am failing miserably. I have been sitting in this shop class for a semester staring at a table-mounted vice grip in like total incomprehension. And that's what I'm going to do once again today. And I'm heading for shop class. Before I can get through the door, Amanda and her friends are there waiting for me. And she says, there's a dance on Friday. And I told my friends, you're going to take me to the dance. Are you going to take me to the dance? And I just stand there, say nothing, stare at her, don't respond. And she's like, I'm going to tell them you're going to take me to the dance. And she runs away and talks to her friends. And they laugh and they giggle and point at me. And then eventually at some point, I wait to see if she's ever coming back. And she's not. And I'm free to go. And so I kind of shrug like that table-mounted vice grip's not going to stare at itself. And I turn and I head into shop class and I'm going, and as I'm walking away, I am very conscious of like Amanda and her friends standing in the doorway staring at my back, and I'm very self-conscious about my body. I'm a fat kid, and I can't figure out like what do I look like from the back? What does my ass look like from the back? And it looks like the ass of a fat 13-year-old. That's what it looks like, and it's not great. And I'm aware of that, and like the pressure of like them staring at me, and like all of the isolation, and all the sort of stress been under with all this situation, like school and everything, just like sort of gets like on top of me all at once. I guess I just kind of broke for a minute because what I do is I do this little dance. I am passing between these two tables, right? And as I get like right between them, I suddenly out of nowhere reach out, grab these two tables, sort of hop into the air, and do this little like Running Man, pogo, mashed potato, kind of Alvin Ailey thing that if I tried to repeat now would snap my spine. And then I land and I kind of turn around and look at Amanda over my shoulder, give her a little smirk and a little eyebrow waggle, and then turn back and head off to my table where the table mounted vice script is sitting there. And I sit down and I look at it. I'm trying desperately not to look at the doorway where Amanda and her friends are because I can see them on my peripheral vision and they're just drop-jawed because they don't know what that was. And I don't know what that was. Like, that was not a planned thing, and I don't know what it means, and neither do they. And, like, eventually, at some point, the bell rings, and they run off to get to class, and I'm just sitting there through shop class going, like, this is not going to be good. Like, am I going to, like, come out of shop class, and Heath's going to be there? Like, I wasn't inspired before, but then I heard about the little dance, and so now, and, like, it's like, what's going to happen when I have to go back out into the world? And the bell rings and shop class is over, and I walk out, and there is no one there. No Amanda, none of her friends, no Heath. And in fact, I don't see them for the rest of the day. And the next morning comes, and I come into school, and I walk in, and I pass by Amanda and her friends, and they do not make eye contact. They just look at their shoes and do not acknowledge me at all. And so whatever, like, I have blown their minds. They cannot handle this reality. And they don't look up. And I just pass right by them. And that was it. They didn't talk to me again for the rest of the year, for the rest of school. I never had another conversation with Amanda Stump. And I don't know what I learned from this. Like, it was not the end of my nerdery. I had another 3 solid years of that to go. And I don't know, maybe I learned something about the power of self-expression. I'm not sure if I did. But you know what? I know for a fact Amanda Stump did. Thank you.